Have you ever felt trapped in a cycle where someone tears you down and then pulls you back in with apologies or, I love you so much? You're not alone. In today's episode of the Flying Free podcast, we're going to unpack this push pull cycle of emotional abuse, what it looks like, why it keeps us hooked, and most importantly, how to break free without losing yourself. I'm going to walk you through 9 tactics that abusers use to reel us back in. And then I'm going to share 6 practical strategies that you can start using today to protect your peace and dignity. So if you've ever wondered, why do I keep getting pulled back into this? Well, this episode is for you. Today, we're going to dive into something that I know hits really close to home for so many of us, me included. It is a topic that I have wrestled with personally and one that comes up again and again in our Flying Free community. And it's this: how do emotional abusers pull us back into these toxic cycles? And more importantly, what can we actually do about it? So what we're talking about more specifically is this push-pull cycle that's extremely common in relationships where there's abuse happening. Here's how the typical pattern goes. The abuser feels offended by something that you say or do. It could be anything. It could be that you didn't make the roast the way he wanted it made, or you didn't wear the dress that they wanted you to wear, or you cut your hair, or you liked a different style of carpeting. It could be that you said something with a tone that they didn't like, or you set a limit or a boundary, or maybe you walked away from a conversation that was going south. It could be simply because you have a different opinion than they do, or you didn't give them their way. It could be for any reason at all, but they have certain beliefs about the world that create their feelings, and they get personally offended and affronted if you do not share those beliefs and buy into their universe. So, number 2, they attack you. They blame you. They shame you. They put you on a guilt trip. They accuse you of something. We're going to get into some very specific examples in a minute, so hang in there. Number 3, you set a boundary. You're kind and firm, but you set a boundary. And then number 4, they escalate. They get meaner. They throw in a few cruel, passive-aggressive jabs. Then, number 5, they eventually soften and they apologize and they tell you that they love you. And again, we're going to get really specific in a few minutes here, but they make these convincing pleas to reconnect. So what do? Number 6, you open up your heart again. Why? Because you love this person. You want the relationship. And then 7 is just rinse and repeat. This is not about you failing. This is about whatever mental illness or personality disorder or brain's programming that they have and how they interpret what closeness and boundaries are going to mean for them. People with issues like this will often swing between a desperate need for connection and an intense fear of abandonment. Not all of them do, but this is a dynamic that I'm experiencing, that I have experienced in my relationships in my history. And this can come out as aggression and then guilt and then basically pulling you back in. Now, I have looked at this cycle in my own life and how this plays out in my interpersonal relationships. And I've recognized that I unintentionally reinforce the cycle. That means I'm not reinforcing it on purpose intentionally because I can't stand it, but I'm unintentionally doing it in a few different ways. And I think this self-awareness is really important for all of us. First of all, I re-engage too soon after the mean phase. And what this does is it teaches the other person that if they apologize or soften enough, that I'm going to reset everything and let them back in, even though their harmful behavior hasn't changed. Another way that I have historically unintentionally reinforced this cycle is by explaining and justifying my boundaries at great length. But all this does is invites debate, arguing, and manipulation. And the arguments go in circles, they don't go anywhere really, instead of just closing the door on the behavior. Another thing I've done with people like this is I take responsibility for their feelings. And this is not only impossible because we can't take responsibility for someone else's emotions. We can't change their feelings. Their feelings are coming from their own programming and their thoughts, but it's exhausting because we're literally beating our head on a brick wall. Ow, why do we do that? We need to stop doing that. The truth is, We cannot fix, rescue, or stabilize another adult person. We can only decide what we will and won't allow in our own life. Boundaries are not meant to control another person's behavior. That's not possible. The boundaries are meant to protect me from their behavior. So what helps to break the cycle? Well, short, firm boundaries, like, and again, we're going to get into this in detail a little bit, but things like that comment was disrespectful. I'm going to step away now. No lengthy explanations, because explanations will become the weapons they end up turning and using on you. And then consistency, showing that if they're going to be cruel, they're going to lose access to us. If they're going to be kind and respectful, then they will gain access to us, right? We may love the person hurting us over and over again, but love without boundaries is not safe for either of us. Love with firm, consistent boundaries is respectful for both myself and the other person, because it gives both people the freedom to decide for themselves who they want to be in that relationship and whether or not they want that relationship to continue. All right, I'm going to share with you now 9 specific tactics that emotional abusers use to hook us back in to this cycle, okay? These are not just random behaviors that happen once in a blue moon. These are patterns of behavior. Imagine walking around a block. Like, this is a block that you have walked around over and over again. If you want to walk around that block, great. But if you start realizing that walking around this block is harmful to you, then you might want to think about what you can change in order to get out of that cycle. These patterns of behavior show up in emotionally abusive relationships everywhere, which is why it's so important that we learn to recognize them. Then I'm going to give you 6 practical strategies that you can start using today to step out of that ring while keeping your dignity intact. Again, this is something that I struggle with too. Even now, after all I've learned and all the healing that I've done, that pull toward unhealthy dynamics can still catch me off guard sometimes. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I should know better by now. Why am I still struggling with this? Why do I still get looped in? I want to beg you to please give yourself some grace. This stuff is complicated and it takes time to rewire our responses. All right, now let's get into these 9 tactics. They're not unique to one person or one type of relationship. You could be thinking about these. You might recognize these tactics in your relationship with your spouse, yes. Or it might be that these dynamics are showing up with your parents or just one parent. It could be a sibling or a friend. It could be your pastor or maybe your women's ministry leader. It could be people that you really, that you think that you should be able to respect, right? It could be your adult child. These are patterns that show up again and again in an emotionally abusive dynamic. And here's what I want you to remember as we go through these 9 patterns. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward breaking free from them. All right. The first tactic number 1 is guilt tripping. And this could be the most common one, really. And it's devastatingly effective. For example, if you set a boundary around a family event or something, like they might say things, we see this sometimes with parents, right? They want us to come to Thanksgiving or dinner or, something like that. And they might say things like, well, if you really loved me, you would come. Or if you really loved me, you'd let me do this, or you would give me my way in this way, or you must not want me around. I can tell that you don't care about me anymore. The goal here is to make you question your own love, your own loyalty, and your very character. They are essentially saying what they're communicating with you is a good person would do what I want. And because most of us want to be good people, we start second guessing ourselves. Maybe I'm not a good person. I had a woman in our community tell me that her husband would say things like, well, I guess you don't care about our marriage anymore, whenever she would try to set some kind of a safe boundary for herself. Can you see how this works? It puts her in the position of having to prove her love by abandoning her own needs for safety on the altar of his power-hungry lust. All right, so that's tactic number 1. Tactic number 2 is passive aggression and sarcasm. So instead of being direct about what they want or how they feel, they will throw these cutting little comments that leave you feeling unsettled and confused. Things like, thanks for the distance, or maybe I should just stop trying, or, well, I can see where I stand with you. These are comments that are designed to stir up guilt and confusion in us, without them having to take any responsibility for being an adult and directly asking for what they want. It's manipulation disguised as martyrdom or victimhood. In the Flying Free Kaleidoscope, we have a discussion space devoted to this. It's called Toxic Text Interpretations, and members can get help interpreting the abuse strategies used in the written words that their abuser is offering them. And this can be very revealing and bring a lot of clarity to their individual situations. All right, tactic number 3 is blame shifting. And this one is it's so unfair. Suddenly you become the problem, right? They'll say things like, you led me on, or you made me think I could trust you, and then look what you did. Or this is all happening because of what you did. Now, often the real victim in the relationship is carrying the bulk of the emotional and physical labor in the relationship, and they are working overtime to avoid being blamed or shamed. And yet, the bar is always set a little higher, that they can never reach it as a human being. Meanwhile, the abuser is the one who is actually making the choices that are leading to his or her bad results. But since abusers can never take responsibility, that is the number one quintessential sign that you are dealing with an abuser. They will not take responsibility. They'll put that responsibility on you. It can never be about their behavior, their choices, their responsibility. It always has to be about what you did wrong. And this is designed to keep you focused on defending yourself instead of addressing their problematic behavior. Tactic number 4 is escalation. So when the subtle tactics don't work, when the passive aggressiveness doesn't work, or the silent treatment doesn't work, they will begin to escalate. Maybe they will start yelling at you, or name calling, or swearing, or just raising that emotional intensity until you feel overwhelmed. They might bombard you with emails, or with texts, or with FaceTime phone calls until you are exhausted. They might say things like, what kind of a terrible person would do this to someone that they claim that they love? Or what kind of a God do you worship that you would treat me in this way? Or you're just a hypocrite. You think you're such a godly person and that you're the only one who does anything right. Take the log out of your own eye. And the goal that they have here is to intimidate you. They want to wear you down until it feels easier to just give them what they want in the moment in order to keep the peace and to stop fighting. Tactic number 5 is all or nothing thinking. This is that black and white language that makes everything feel dramatic or final. Well, I guess I'll never be able to talk to you again. Or, fine, I'm always the bad guy. Or, I can see you've already made up your mind about me. Or, even this, we see this a lot actually in our community. I may as well just die. You're not giving me any reasons to live. Now, this tactic is designed to make you feel like if you don't give them what they want, the relationship is over, or they might even kill themselves. It is emotional blackmail, essentially. And by the way, if anyone you love is threatening suicide, call 911. If they are serious about committing suicide, then they need help now. And that's not going to be able to come from you, but a hospital can help them. And if they are not serious, but they're just using that as a tactic to emotionally blackmail you, then if you call 911, they will quickly learn that that is not an effective abuse strategy that they're going to be able to use with you. Tactic number 6 is love bombing and after meanness. So in the abuse cycle pictures that you can find online, which I just talked about in an episode or 3 ago, this one's really painful because this is called the honeymoon period. That's what it's called. And yet, you guys, the honeymoon period is still 100% pure abuse. Because after they've been cruel or manipulative, suddenly they just switch gears. I love you so much. You're the only one I can count on. I don't know what I would do without you. This is where you're going to see the crocodile tears show up and hear all the words that your nervous system is longing to hear to bring you relief. there's going to be a very strong pull to believe them because we want that relief in our body. It's like a dopamine hit. And this is where, if you want to break free from this cycle, you are going to need to hang on to your logical wisdom and understanding here instead of in your body, where you're feeling that craving for that those chemicals that are going to make you feel better. You're going to need to stay here in what you know is true and radically accept that this is just part of the cycle. Just because it's called the honeymoon part of the cycle doesn't mean that it's good. Have you ever lifted weights before or done pull-ups or something that requires some effort from you? It's the same thing. It requires you to fight your desire to just quit when it starts to get hard, and you need to keep lifting or pulling until your muscles actually fail you. Resist the urge to believe what you know deep down is not true. The other person did not just make a one-time mistake. Remember, you've been around this block many times before, and you don't have to repeat the same walk. You can take a turn in a new direction, even though it feels uncomfortable, because it's unfamiliar and you've never walked down a different road before. It's the only way you're going to ever break free from the cycle. We're going to talk about specifically what you can do in a little bit here. But tactic number 7 is testing boundaries and arguing over rules. And this is where they're just going to nitpick all the conditions that you've set. Well, that wasn't what you said before, or you're just looking for a loophole to keep me away, or you're being unreasonable. No one else would have a problem with this. Abusive individuals are masters at knowing just how far to push your boundary. They are genius in this area. They're not actually confused about your boundary. They're just testing it to see if you will bend it, modify it, or abandon it altogether. I just want to give a little caveat here too, because kids will do this. And I've had a lot of women come through the program, the Kaleidoscope program, who will say, well, my child must be an abuser because they do this. No, this is actually a normal part of childhood development and brain development, to test boundaries and argue over rules. This is them figuring out who they are and learning how to become an independent person. It's not abusive unless they're an adult. If you've got an adult who never made that passage of life through adolescence and came out on the other side, now you've got a bona fide abuser, right? That's when it becomes a problem. So don't think that your kids are abusive just because they're doing what's normal for a lot of kids to do. Most kids do. But that doesn't mean that when your children are adults, that they can pretend to be a child still and say, and that once they're an adult, now there's a higher expectation for them to show up as a responsible and respectful adult. And it does cross over into abuse when they're not able to do that. All right. Tactic number 8 is playing the victim. I'm always the one left out, or I'm just the bad person in everyone's life, or no one understands what I'm going through. And this tactic is effective because it hooks into your compassion. It makes empathetic people want to rescue them or reassure them, oh, that's not true, or prove that, no, I'm not like everybody else who supposedly treats them badly. I'm different. I can help you. Recently, when dealing with someone in my personal life who continues to utilize all of these tactics to loop me in, I noticed that the firmer my boundary, the more the other person would cry out that they were my victim. And then the more others on the outside began to defend this person. And I thought back to my history with and interactions with other abusive individuals and saw that this was definitely a common trait or a common theme. If you're familiar with Myers-Briggs, I'm an INFJ. One of the traits of INFJs is that we can put up with a lot. And we can do it for a very long time. We have a ton of empathy. We can get lost in the feelings and emotions of others while setting ourselves aside if necessary. But what is also true about us is that when we are finally done, takes us a long time to get there, but when we are finally done, we are done. Like, it is over, baby. The line gets crossed one too many times and there is no going back. It's finished. Over. The end. But it can take years, decades even, to get there. So someone would hurt me over and over again until I would finally set a boundary for myself. Usually it was some version of, this really is painful and it keeps happening and I need to like step away. I need you to stop harassing me. I need you to be more respectful, or that was so painful to hear. I really don't want to engage in this anymore. And then the other person would pull out all the tactics that I just offered. But the biggest one was this number 8, playing the victim. They would suddenly become my victim, which would really kill me because I had been bending over backwards to offer them a million concessions and chances. I had compromised my own emotional health for years to cater to their needs. And yet when I could not do it anymore, I was now their perpetrator. Now that is very discombobulating. My youngest daughter noticed this was happening to me and she said, Mom, the reason that people are defending this person is because this person is pretending to be your victim and saying all the right words to come across that way. And you aren't doing that. You're not playing that victim role. So you're coming across strong because you've set a boundary for yourself. And this other person is coming across as weak and needy. So it looks to those on the outside like you are the mean one. But that's not true. They just can't see that truth. So this is my youngest daughter. She's like so wise. It just blew my mind. And it really helped to kind of snap me out of that discombobulating feeling, the disorienting feeling that I was experiencing. All right. Tactic number 9 is pushing for endless processing. Oh, this is so exhausting. This is when they insist on talking until you're completely drained. And not all abusers will do this. I've had people who have been abusive in my life who do the opposite. They just like won't talk to you for days, weeks, months. I've got some family members who haven't talked to me for many, many years. So they're not trying to get endless processing, but other abusive people will try to process endlessly with you. They'll say things like, well, we need to keep talking until we understand each other, or let's just get this resolved once and for all, or I'm not letting this go until we've got it all worked out. And that sounds really good, right? I mean, we want that too. It would be wonderful if that is exactly what they, actually wanted, but that's not what they want. What they want is to get their own way. And so the point is not to have a meeting of the minds, but and to share perspectives and to come up with a compromise. The point is to get exactly what they want. And that means to keep you engaged, keep you exhausted, and keep you focused on all this drama instead of your own well-being. And the reason that this tactic often works for these people is because they are targeting our deepest desires: to be loved and to love, to be understood and to understand someone else, and to maintain a mutual connection with the people that we care about the most. Now, there's nothing wrong with wanting those things. I'm going to always want those things. I'm going to always pursue those things in my life. The problem is when someone else from the outside comes in and tries to use those beautiful desires that we might have in order to manipulate us and use us and exert power over us. All right. So what do we do with all of this? Because ignoring all of this often leads to, if we ignore it, it's going to lead to accusations of, you've abandoned me, right? And if we attack back, that's going to fuel the fire. So here are 6 healthier strategies that you can start using today. Strategy 1 is to keep your responses short and simple. And this is probably the hardest one for most of us because we have been trained, especially as Christian women, when someone asks you a question, you have to answer it. You have to explain yourself. You have to justify your decision, and you have to help everyone understand your perspective. So, raise your hand if you're the kind of person who thinks that just because someone asks you a question that you must answer it. I'm definitely would be raising my hand. Then you are also the kind of person like me who can get caught up in this relationship dynamic because it's actually not true. Just because someone asks you a question, you don't have to answer it. You can just say, I'm not going to answer that question. But when you are dealing with someone who's using these manipulative tactics, long explanations And answering their endless barrage of questions are meant to trip you up and will become ammunition that they use against you. So instead of the paragraph long explanations of why you need something or why you need space or why you're creating this boundary, you could just say the boundary stands. Instead of explaining why their behavior is hurtful, because I mean, haven't you already done that a million times already? Try just saying that behavior is disrespectful and I'm not going to continue if that behavior continues. Or I will not engage with sarcasm. If you want to talk respectfully, I'm here. Period. End of sentence. Less is more. I know this feels uncomfortable at first. We want to be understood. We want to help them see our perspective. We mistakenly believe that if they can see where we're coming from, then there will be this meeting of the minds and we can solve the problem. And that's what we want. That's our goal. But that's not their goal. Remember, someone who actually is genuinely interested in understanding you, they're not going to need to manipulate you to get that information, right? I mean, if you're dealing with a regular person who's just like, let's sit down and talk this through, you're more than willing to do that. Like every day, twice every day, and 5 million times on Sunday, you're ready to do that. That's not what these people are looking for, though. All right, strategy number 2 is do not defend or justify yourself. When they accuse you of something like, you led me on, or you're just trying to hurt me, resist the urge to jump into proving your innocence. Instead, try responses like, I will not accept blame for your feelings. Or I am responsible for my words and my boundaries and my behaviors. I am not responsible for your interpretations of those things. Or you could keep it even more simple by saying, that's not true. Or I see that differently. Or even just, okay. Now, I know this might feel wrong. Every fiber of your being wants to clear your name, right? But here's what I've learned. Defensiveness only invites debate. When you start defending yourself, you are essentially agreeing to putting your own character on trial. And guess who gets to be the judge? They do. Do you really want to do that? You don't have to do that. All right, strategy number 3, step away from disrespect. This one requires both our words and our actions. So when they start to escalate, you can calmly say something like, this conversation has become disrespectful. I'm going to step away until we can talk respectfully. And then, this is crucial, you have to follow through. Don't just threaten to leave. If you threaten to do things and then you never follow through, they're going to call your bluff every time. They're not going to respect anything that comes out of your mouth. So do not say this and do not say anything that you are going to do if you are not prepared 100% to follow through and do it. So actually leave the conversation, leave the room, end the phone call. I've talked to women who've told me that their soon-to-be ex or their adult child is berating them on the phone for over an hour. And my thought is, what has you listening to that for over an hour? How is that serving you? How is that serving the other person? Hang up the phone. You are an adult. I mean, respect their right to freak out and be an asshole if they want to, but also please respect yourself and your own space and your right to just hang up the phone. You don't have to listen to that. Your actions are going to teach them more than anything else that disrespect has consequences. It's going to teach them that better than words alone are going to. All right, strategy number 4, return only when kindness resumes. You can say something like, I love you and I'll connect with you again when our conversation can be respectful. And by the way, this might sound like, if you're in an abusive marriage, this might sound like, oh, you mean like when they're kind, like during the honeymoon period? And I'm saying, no, I really think that's actually part of the cycle that you can actually take some different steps. You don't need to like move closer to them when they start love bombing you. I'm talking about when you're in a relationship with someone, maybe it's an elderly parent or an adult child or someone that maybe it's your boss at work, someone that you're not prepared to walk away from that relationship quite yet. And you want to continue that relationship. Well, then you need to teach them by your actions what you will and what you won't tolerate. So, you're going to teach them that their kindness and if they're kind and respectful to you, that's going to equal access to you. But if they're going to be rude and cruel, then that's going to equal distance from you. This is not punishment. You're not punishing them. This is just natural consequences. It's like if you're a bunny rabbit, is the bunny rabbit being cruel for running away when the fox is trying to get him? No. Is the bunny rabbit punishing the fox? No. The bunny rabbit's teaching the fox that if you are going to try to eat me, I am going to run away. I'm going to go into my little hole, burrow into my little hole. Okay, that's what this is. Notice that you can do this while still affirming your love for them. You are not rejecting them as a person. What you're rejecting and saying no to is their behavior. And that is very adult-like and perfectly acceptable. Strategy number 5 is avoid rehashing the past. When they try to drag up old wounds or past conflicts, hold your ground. I am not going to rehash the past. If you need to process that, please bring it to your therapist. Now, that's not to say that if we have an adult child, I've had this happen, an adult child who comes to us and says, there are some things that you did when I was a child that were very painful for me. I do think that and they've never told us this before, or maybe they've tried to tell us, but weren't in a place where we could hear it or accept it. I think it's very important for us as parents to own that we made a lot of mistakes. There's no parent who doesn't make mistakes, and that we apologize and ask for forgiveness for those mistakes and acknowledge the pain that we caused that child. Even if we didn't see it that way, it obviously caused them pain because they're expressing that to us, and also to appreciate the fact that they are willing to make themselves vulnerable enough to come to us and say that they have experienced pain at our when they were children. However, when you have someone, whether it's an adult child or a mother or whatever the case might be, a friend who is constantly wanting to bring up the same stuff over and over and over again after you have already wept tears, said you were sorry, begged for forgiveness, and want to move on. And at the same time, they are not acknowledging all the ways that they are contributing to the destruction of this relationship. That is what I'm talking about here in this strategy number 5. They need to go to a therapist to process that pain. They're not going to be able to do that with you, and you're not going to be able to do that with them. This protects you from these endless circular conversations that leave you feeling crazy and exhausted. You are not responsible for being someone else's therapist, especially when they're using the idea of processing as a way to keep you hooked into their drama and their abuse of you. All right. And then finally, strategy number 6, focus on self-respect, not on trying to control others. I think this is the most important one. And it's the one that took me the longest to understand. Boundaries are not about changing someone else. They are about protecting yourself. Your job is not to manage their emotions or fix their problems or make them understand your perspective. Your job is to manage your own adult choices and protect your own peace. And when you get this, I mean, you really deeply understand this, everything changes. You stop trying to convince them that they should treat you better, and you start simply choosing how you're going to respond when they don't, because they're not going to. All right, now let me give you some specific language that you can use. So for example, when they guilt trip, you can say, I understand you're disappointed, but my decision stands. When they try to blame shift, you can say, I'm not responsible for your feelings or your emotions about my choices. When they try to escalate and ramp up the emotional level of energy, you can say, I'm ending this conversation now. We can try again when you're ready to be respectful. If they play the victim, you can say, I'm really sorry that you are struggling. Have you considered talking to a therapist about that? When they push for processing, you can say, I have said what I need to say. I'm not going to keep going in circles. So let me tell you what these strategies actually accomplish for you. First, they protect your energy. Instead of getting drained by hours of circular conversations, you will be able to preserve your emotional resources for things that actually matter in your life. Second, they maintain your dignity. You're not attacking them, and you're not allowing yourself to be attacked. Third, they create clarity because when you stop participating in all that chaos, it becomes much easier to see the situation for what it really is. And fourth, and this might surprise you, they actually create the possibility for healthier interaction. When you stop rewarding manipulative behavior with your attention and your engagement, you create space for more authentic connection. Now, will this actually happen? Maybe, maybe not. More than likely not. It does take two people actively pursuing respect and kindness. And you may be the only one capable of doing that, but at least you will have done what you could, right? And that honestly feels good. But here's what you need to know. Implementing these strategies does not feel good at first. It feels mean. It feels selfish. It feels wrong. And in fact, some people will tell you you're being mean and selfish and wrong if you do these things. All right. So they're going to echo what you're already kind of wondering about inside. That's normal though. You've been conditioned, and whoever's telling you that has been conditioned to believe that love means that you tolerate whatever someone dishes out. But that is not love. That is enabling. That is, dare I say it, codependence. Real love sometimes means allowing people to experience the natural consequences of their choices. Now, here's the part that no one really talks about, but maybe it's the most important part. Even if you do this all perfectly, and no one does, no one really can, it's still going to hurt to step away. It's still going to hurt to not explain yourself. It's going to hurt, like physically hurt, to feel misunderstood and to be accused of not loving someone enough. And it hurts even more when it's actually someone that you desperately love and have longed and prayed to have a healthy relationship with for many, many years. Let me be completely honest with you. There is a part of me that still wants to jump back in sometimes. That part of me that wants to prove my love and show my good intentions or help them understand my heart. That is the vulnerable, tender part of me that craves connection. And you know what? That is not wrong. That's human. But here's what I've learned, sometimes the hard way. Real connection cannot be built on manipulation. It can only be built on mutual respect. So when someone is using these tactics, the guilt tripping, the blame shifting, the emotional escalation, they are not actually seeking connection with you. They are seeking control over you. And you cannot build authentic relationship on a foundation of control. So when you walk away from these dynamics, you will feel grief. You might feel guilt. You might even feel like you're the one being cruel. That does not mean you're wrong. That means you're human and you've been programmed to believe some things that aren't actually true. Allow yourself to grieve the relationship that you wish you had instead of continually sacrificing yourself to the relationship that you actually have. Here's what you're actually grieving. You're grieving the loss of the hope that they're going to actually change. You got to let that go. You've got to let that go. I can't stress that enough. You also need to grieve the fantasy that you're going to have that there's going to be mutual respect and understanding in this relationship. There's not. You need to grieve the dream that you will truly be seen and valued by this particular person. You are seen and valued, just not by this person. You need to grieve the comfort of familiar patterns, even when those patterns hurt. It's comforting to walk around the same block and see the same things over and over and over again. That's more comfortable than going down a completely different path and exploring new places and experiencing new scenery. But you need to grieve that. But here's what you're going to gain when you step out of these cycles. And I think this is worth it. Peace in your own mind and heart, dignity and self-respect, energy to invest in relationships that are actually healthy. I mean, you've got all of this willingness to work on relationships. Like, why not work on and use all of that good stuff that you have to offer in relationships that will actually have something to give back to you? And also, you're going to gain space for your own healing and growth. And then finally, you will gain the possibility, not the guarantee, but the possibility of healthier connection in the future. If it's going to happen, it's going to have to start with you. Because here's the thing. When you stop participating in unhealthy dynamics, you're not the one destroying the relationship. All you're doing is refusing to accept a counterfeit version of that relationship. You are creating space for something real to develop. If the other person chooses to step into that space, then that would be a beautiful thing, right? All right, now I want to address something that I know some of you are thinking, but what if he or that person never changes? What if I lose this relationship forever? I need you to hear this. A relationship that can only exist when you abandon your own well-being, that is not a relationship, my friend. That is a hostage situation. You are not responsible for maintaining connection at the expense of your own mental, emotional, and spiritual health. God did not create you to be someone else's emotional punching bag. He didn't create anyone to be that, even if they wrap their fists in religious language or family obligation. And here's something else that you need to know. Choosing to protect yourself does not make you an unforgiving, unloving, unchristian Christian, okay? It makes you wise. The Bible tells us to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. And sometimes wisdom looks like recognizing manipulation and refusing to participate in it. Sometimes gentleness looks like speaking truth with kindness and then stepping away when that truth is rejected. I want to give you permission for something. It is okay to love someone from a distance. I love a lot of people. After all these years, I love a lot of people from a distance. It is okay to want good things for someone while protecting yourself from their destructive behavior. It is okay to pray for and desire someone else's healing while also refusing to be their target. You can hold space in your heart for someone without giving them access to wound you. All right. So just to recap what we've covered today, we've looked at 9 tactics that emotional abusers use to pull us back into these toxic cycles. And then we talked about 6 strategies that you can use to unhook. And we also acknowledged that letting go hurts, but it is a necessary pain. It's the kind of pain that leads you to healing instead of the kind of pain that maybe some of you are stuck in that keeps you stuck. Here's what I want you to remember. You're not alone in this struggle. So many of us have been exactly where you are right now. The pull to stay engaged in these toxic loops is real and it is strong. And there is nothing wrong with you for feeling that, but you can learn to unhook and you can have peace. You can choose dignity. And in the end, that is what creates space for true freedom and the possibility of healthier relationships. If you want more education, more practical tools for how to do this, and more support along the way, consider working with me inside the Flying Free Kaleidoscope community. You can spend hundreds of dollars on self-help, books, classes, coaching, counseling, or you can spend less than $1 a day for spiritually grounded, trauma-informed education, community, and coaching. And the best part, this is the most effective way for Christian women to recover from emotional and spiritual abuse and start making confident, empowered adult choices for their lives. It's the most effective and the most affordable. Go to joinflyingfree.com to learn more and complete your application. Also, if this episode was helpful to you, please share it with someone else who might want to hear these words. And until next time, I want you to remember that you were created for freedom, not for chains. You were made for peace, not for chaos. And you have permission to choose what serves your healing, even if other people don't understand that choice. Until next time, fly free.